I want to tell you a story that happened to me. In the spring of 1951, we had rented a number of acres of farmland that year. I was not in school then, and my brother was out of school, and we decided that we were going to farm. And we were going to farm big. We farmed a little too big that year, but anyway, we started. And that spring, my mother was sick, very sick. She was in the hospital. My father was helping his brother wire a house. He fell and broke his ankle, and Mother and Dad were both in the hospital. And it was time to farm, and we had several hundred acres, nearly 1,000 acres of land to put in. And Dad had made a decision that spring that my brother and I were not very happy about. On one of the farms that we had rented, there was a 60-acre field that was sort of like a V. It was about a half a mile across on this end, and it came down to literally nothing on this end, where a road came and the railroad track came through. And we were going to put that field in corn. And Dad had decided we were going to check row that corn. You know what that means? That means you have a wire that goes across the field with a knot in it every 3 feet, and you put that in the corn planter and it clicks, and you only plant corn on 3 feet intervals. And you have rows but running both directions. And my brother and I knew that if we were going to check row that field of corn, that it was going to be planted by the horses, because the tractor planter did not have a check row attachment on it. And we argued with Dad. We said, you know, we've got a lot of crop to put in this year. We've got hundreds of acres to go over. And you'll only plant 6, 8, 10 acres a day with the team. And we can plant that in an hour with the tractor. We've got a 4-row planter. You're going to fool around with that team of horses with a 2-row planter, swinging that check wire, doing all of that monkey business? But Dad says we're checking it. So we did. The only problem was Dad was in the hospital. So it fell my lot to plant that field of corn. And I started. My brother and I decided that due to the fact we had so much crop to put in and so many acres of land to go over, that we would plant just real early in the morning while it was still cool. And when it got hot, we'd put the horses up and we'd drive the tractor. So the first morning, I was out there before you could see the marker across the field, before daylight. Got the corn boxes filled with corn and the fertilizer attachments filled with fertilizer. And just as soon as I could see that stake half a mile across the field, I struck out. It was about 4:30. And I planted just round and round and around and around. I didn't let the horses rest at all. Till about 9:30, and they were getting lathered up pretty good with sweat. It was getting hot. So I stopped, took them, put them in the barn, and got back on the old Farmall tractor and went to plowing, working with it. It didn't sweat like the horses, you know. So the next morning, the same thing again. I was back out there before daylight, ready to go. But I'll tell you, about 9:15, those horses were ready to quit. And I couldn't get them to start another row back across the field. They said, it's 9:30, you quit yesterday, it's time to quit. It took me 7 days to plant that 60 acres because of the just working those few hours early in the morning. And every morning it was the same thing. Long between 9 and 9:30, you just couldn't get them to start back across the field. The last day, those rows were getting down to where they were just a few feet across. You know, the last ones was only half the distance of the length of the sanctuary here. I thought I was going to finish up that morning, but I recognized that I wasn't going to be done at 9:30. And I was just dreading the problem I was going to have, because I was determined to finish, and I saw it was going to be 11, 12 o'clock before I was done. But you know, the shorter the rows got, the faster that team went. And at 9:30, we still had quite a bit to plant. They didn't even think of slowing down. They were just going round and round and round. And when we had to stop and fill the fertilizer attachments, they were anxious to go. They sensed and recognized that we were almost done. The rows were short. The time was over. The planting was almost done. And round they went. And we finished up that morning just before noon. They sensed the shortness of finishing the task. They recognized it was almost over. And faster they went.